to the U.S. Court of Appeals. A vote to move that nomination forward is scheduled for 5:30 Eastern. The House is not in session today. Members are taking the week off for its Memorial Day recess. Live Senate coverage now here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. Our chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our provider, give to our lawmakers provisions for their daily needs. Give them grace to keep your commandments, to accept your guidance, to stay on your path, and to walk in your light. Lord, give them stamina to run until they reach their goal, and to be true to you until the very end. Make them this day wise with your wisdom and strong with your strength. Help them to believe in your power so that they may be certain that you are able to do for them more than they can ask or imagine. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., May 21, 2012. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Benjamin L. Cardin, a senator from the state of Maryland, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader is recognized.
I now move to proceed to calendar number 400, S3187.
Clerk will report the motion.
Motion to proceed to consideration of calendar number 400, S3187, a bill to amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and so forth, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, we're now on the motion to proceed to the FDA user fees bill. At 4:30, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the nomination of Paul Watford to be a member of the Ninth Circuit. At 5:30, there will be a cloture vote on the Watford nomination. If we're able to confirm his nomination, we should expect a second vote, cloture vote, on the motion to proceed to FDA user fees legislation. Mr. President, this week the Senate must complete work on legislation that will enact crucial reforms that will prevent drug shortages and bring life-saving medicines to the market more quickly. Senators Harkin and Enzi, a Democrat and a Republican, worked very hard to bring this legislation to the floor. I'm cautiously optimistic that the spirit of bipartisanship will continue because Democrats can't pass this legislation without the cooperation of our Republican colleagues. I certainly hope they'll allow us to advance this bill this evening without additional delay caused by another filibuster. I would like senators from both parties to be free to offer relevant amendments to improve a worthy bill. But before we can get to work on this legislation in earnest, my Republican colleagues must stop their filibuster. Americans living with cancer and other life-threatening illnesses are watching closely to see whether the Senate is capable of quick action to ease these shortages of crucial medicines, or whether we'll once more be paralyzed by Republican obstructionism. Americans have seen that obstruction time and time again this Congress. They're frustrated with the slow pace of Senate action to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, on Iran sanctions, on legislation to stop interest rates from doubling on federal student loans. Earlier this month, Republicans blocked an attempt to keep higher education affordable for 7 million students. But Democrats haven't given up. I hope our Republican colleagues will come to their senses and allow us to prevent this crisis that affects 7 million young men and women before it's too late. Republican obstruction and infighting have also stalled critical new sanctions on Iran. For 2 months, Democrats have worked to resolve Republican objections to this bipartisan measure, which passed out of the Banking Committee unanimously. The stakes couldn't be higher. Sanctions are a key tool to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, threatening Israel, and jeopardizing the United States' national security. We cannot afford more delays to put stronger sanctions in place. I'm hopeful my Republican colleagues will realize how important it is to advance these measures and prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Republicans have also needlessly blocked progress on reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. This helps law enforcement effectively combat and prosecute domestic crimes against women. Although both chambers have passed a version of this legislation, House Republicans have refused to go to conference with the Senate. Their excuse, a hyper-technical budget issue called a blue slip, isn't much of a fig leaf to hide their blatant obstruction. The truth is, Republicans are looking for any excuse to stall or kill this worthy legislation, but the American women haven't been fooled. If Republicans really want to give police the tools they need to prosecute domestic abusers, they'll drop this facade. If Republicans really care about protecting women and families, they'll abandon this hyper-technical objection and join us in conference. Mr. President, are differences between the House and Senate bills that could be worked out easily. American women and families are counting on our action. But this Congress has been, it seems, the Republicans are more interested in inaction than in action. They're more interested in blocking worthy legislation for partisan gain than in working together. Their infighting and partisan games have stopped reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, Iran sanctions, and the student loan fix stopped them right in their tracks. These are just a few of their ways of stopping legislation, a few important measures that they've stopped over the past few weeks. But the FDA bill, which will prevent drug shortages and making life-saving medicines available more quickly, must not become another victim of this partisanship. I hope Republicans seize this opportunity to be cooperative rather than combative. Mr. President, would you announce the business of the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the motion proceed is now pending.
I would note the absence of quorum.
The clerk call the roll.
Mr. Duncan.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I ask consent that be vitiated.
Without objection, the Majority Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the cloture vote, which is scheduled this afternoon on Watford, be vitiated. All of the provisions of that order remain in effect.
Without objection, so ordered. Clerk, call the roll of this.
Mr. Kaka. Ms. Ayotte.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maryland.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I ask that the call of the quorum be vacated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I come to the floor to lend my voice to asking my colleagues to vote for the motion to proceed to the FDA Administration Safety and Innovation Act. Mr. President, I come to this floor as someone who represents a state that is absolutely critical to the innovation economy. And like you in Delaware, with its excellent private sector and public sector, have been in the hallmark of innovation. If you're from Maryland, you know that life science innovation is one of the important economic engines in our economy, both today and in the future. We're the home to flagship government agencies like the National Institutes of Health and to FDA, iconic internationally branded universities that do research and move it into clinical practice at Johns Hopkins and the University of Maryland, and also lots of thriving biotech companies and some medical devices. So for us, life science is part of the lifeblood of the Maryland economy, and it's also part of the lifeblood of the American economy. My gosh, think of what we do. We come up with new biological products, new pharmaceuticals, new medical devices that save lives, improve lives, and also enable them to help people in our own country. And because they are FDA approved, the gold standard for safety and efficacy, they can sell these products around the world, often to countries that will never, ever be able to afford an FDA. Now, where we are is we've worked very closely on a bipartisan basis to be able to create the legislative framework called PDUFA, the Pharmaceutical Drug User Fee Act. And there will be a lot of other UFAs, UFAA, user fees in this. And we have worked together on a bipartisan basis to bring this legislation to the floor. I know on the floor at this moment is the ranking member of the full Health, Education, Labor Committee, the gentleman from Wyoming, Senator Enzi, who has been a leader in fashioning legislation where we can continue the mission of what we want at FDA, safety and efficacy, moving drugs into clinical practice, regulations that are sensible, regulate but don't strangulate the innovation economy or the potential for saving or improving lives. The bill before us is integral to achieving this shared goal. This is not new legislation. PDUFA was enacted in 1992. At that time, we were facing almost a crisis in their country. There was an unduly long wait for patients to have access to new medicines and technologies. For FDA, it often took 2 or 3 years to review a drug application. The submission of materials were submitted manually in a very klutzy fashion. It cost manufacturers almost the tune of $10 million a month. So we decided to come together in the era where Bill Clinton said big government was over, not to make government bigger, but for government to be smaller. And we came up with a public-private partnership called PDUFA, the Pharmaceutical User Fee legislation. It supports drug review, and in exchange, FDA's agreement, so those who made the products paid a fee to be able to have their drugs reviewed, and also they expected their government to reduce the time that it took in order to move it expeditiously and yet safely. Now, let's be clear. This is a public-private partnership. For FDA, as it looks at its, remember, FDA has 2 jobs, food safety and then the safety of drugs and medical devices. More than 60% in the drug and medical devices comes from industry fees. $712 million. The remainder comes from federal appropriations, $473 million. So private sector really carries a big part of this responsibility. The kind of staffing, expertise, and modernization we have at FDA could not have happened without this public-private partnership. It's been a success. Now the more than 1,500 new medicines or technologies have been approved since 1992. And everything from the dreaded C words like cancer and cardiovascular disease to infectious disease to the dreaded A words around Alzheimer's, which we're working on, and others. It's allowed FDA to have more science, more scientists and staff, and for that given value to the private sector to be able to decrease review times. We've reduced it from 2 years in 1992 to 1.1 years today. Now, over the last so we held excellent hearings. They were very civil, very content-rich, but I also launched a listening tour in Maryland where I went out to the major biotech counties and heard from over 25 different companies about what did they think we needed to do. I asked them where their government helped them, where their government hurt them, where should their government get out of the way, and also where did they need a more muscular government, meaning really moving things ahead. They had great ideas and it was just fantastic. What I heard was we have to reauthorize PDUFA quickly, and we must make, though, improvements to the program. We need to improve the drug review process. We need to increase communication there. In order to speed the drug review process, we made sure that we've increased the number of mandatory performance requirements between FDA and the life science product sponsors. I say life science because it's bio, it's pharma, it's medical devices, and some things that are both. PDUFA 5, which this is, it's the 5th time, allows us to use biomarkers to decrease development time by helping demonstrate therapeutic benefit more quickly. It requires FDA to develop a dedicated program for drug development and training of staff. We face turnover, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'll come back to that. But make sure that those young people who are so smart in science need to know how to work to make the science evaluate in a timely way. This is absolutely critical. We've also incentivized the development of drugs for rare diseases. We also heard that, particularly for parents with children with very unique and poignant, heartbreaking diseases. What requires FDA to develop guidance related to advancing and facilitating these, increase outpatients, not only to the industry, but to those who represent the patient advocacy groups, and again, to develop training and certificate programs within FDA on how to review drugs for rare diseases. I could go through the many benefits of PDUFA. We've done also in here MDUFA, the Medical Device Act. We do generic UFA. So there are several bills in this bill. But we have to act. There has to be a sense of urgency. See, this is a different bill than many others. If we don't reauthorize many other bills, you know, they just keep on going. But with the PDUFAs and the other user fee legislation, they actually would be sunsetted if we do not pass them by October. Now, you might say, well, we'll wait till October. You know, we'll deal with it with the cliff. Well, we can't do that because of the impact on both the people in the private sector and those in the public sector. Failure to reauthorize this in a timely manner would have catastrophic effects on FDA's ability to carry out its important role. If the user fee agreement expires, public and patients, public health, and industry will suffer. This isn't Senator Barr speaking. This is what our leading business and public health advocates are telling us. If we don't reauthorize this budget, the user fee is sunsetted. So that means U.S. pharmaceutical industries, which supports 4 million jobs, would be adversely affected. There would be no FDA to really work with. In 2010, Maryland private life science companies supported over 25,000 jobs. These companies are true innovators. On the average, it takes a new medicine 10 to 15 years to develop. If we fail to reauthorize PDUFA, which ensures efficient, consistent, and predictable regulatory environment, our private sector will lose out. We're going to lose out to Europe, and we're going to lose out to China, some of which is stealing our patents as we speak. It's going to have a terrible consequence to patients. Tens of millions of Americans rely upon drugs and biologics and medical devices, and we know we have legislation that works. We have a legislative framework that works. Now we need to get to work. If we don't pass this and reauthorize these major programs, what will happen is that we will need to send out RIF notices. We won't do it, but Dr. Mary Hamburg, the FDA CEO, the commissioner, will have to, starting in July and August, send out RIF notices to 4,000 federal employees at FDA, from the PhD and the MD to the important lab techs and so on and others that keep FDA going. This is no fooling around, folks. This isn't let's wait for the cliff. We will come to the brink if we do not authorize this. And just think about the world of FDA. If you think you're going to lose your job, that's what you're going to be preoccupied with. You're not going to be preoccupied moving the clinical, looking at these clinical trials and moving their advances forward. We've worked so hard on this legislation. The private sector has worked hard to find a sensible center. So has Dr. Mary Hamburg and her team. Our committee has worked so well. We can do this. We have to have the will. And if we really want to stay ahead in the global economy, it's got to be by passing this legislation. You know, when everybody talks about stopping China, I don't know what China's going to do, but I know we can stop ourselves if we don't pass legislation that promotes innovation in our country and private sector jobs in a partnership with its government. Mr. President, I conclude by urging my people to vote on the motion to proceed, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Wyoming.
I want to thank the senator from Maryland, Senator Mikulski, for her passion and understanding and intense work on this particular bill. Of course, she extends her passion and intense work on any bill that she's involved in. I'm so pleased that this bill has gone to committee and had the time for the committee to work on it. And we have a very bipartisan approach on the bill and a very reasonable way to do it. So I do rise to support S. 3187, the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act of 2012, and I appreciate Senator Mikulski doing the opening statement on that. This bill will reauthorize FDA's drug and medical device user fee programs, authorize new user fee programs for generic drugs and biosimilars, and make a small number of targeted bipartisan policy reforms at the same time. This legislation represents over a full year of work by the Help Committee. Fridays have been dedicated to coming up with solutions on this for over a year, and it's paid off. It reflects the information we've learned from hundreds of meetings with patients, with advocates, with stakeholders, with outside experts, and with the FDA. More importantly, it reflects both the ideas and the feedback that we've gotten from every member of the Help Committee and a lot of people outside of the Help Committee. The Help Committee approved this bill by a voice vote on April 25th and reported the bill out of committee on May 7th. The bill will make important changes to how FDA does business. Thanks to the efforts of Senators Burr and Coburn, the bill now includes new requirements that will make FDA more accountable and transparent. A fundamental principle of effective management is that you have to be able to measure performance if you want to improve it. Senators Burr and Coburn's ideas will help provide those measurements, and as a result, Americans are going to get better access to safe, innovative medical devices and medicines. The bill will also modernize how FDA inspects foreign facilities to better account for the global nature of drug manufacturing. It will allow FDA to prioritize and target riskier overseas facilities, which will help prevent the reoccurrence of the problems with drugs like heparin. It will also improve how FDA regulates medical devices. For the past several years, FDA pre-market review of medical devices has involved significant delay and unpredictability. This has threatened American manufacturing jobs, which have started to migrate overseas because of the unfavorable regulatory environment here in the United States. It's also threatened patient access to new therapies. I believe this bill will reverse those trends. The bill reflects the concerns that I heard in my meetings with committee members regarding the current shortages of vital and life-saving drugs. Senators Blumenthal, Roberts, Casey, Alexander, Bennett, and Hatch should be thanked for all the work they put into the drug shortage proposal. The new notification and coordination requirements are important steps that will help prevent future drug shortages. The bill also enjoys broad support. We've received numerous letters of support from industry, from patient groups, from consumer groups, and a whole raft of other stakeholders. We also work to guarantee that any mandatory spending generated by the bill would be fully offset. Over the past several weeks, we've developed offsets to pay for those provisions that produce mandatory spending. In fact, according to the Congressional Budget Office, this bill will reduce the federal deficit. Chairman Harkin and I have worked very hard to make this bill as bipartisan and non-controversial as possible. We tried to avoid controversy because we understand that this bill needs to get done. If we don't reauthorize the drug and device user fee programs before they expire this fall, the FDA will be forced to lay off 2,000 to 4,000 key employees. This will cause FDA's review of new drugs and devices to grind to a halt. This, in turn, will threaten the biomedical industry jobs, patient access to new therapy, and America's global leadership in biomedical innovation. We're talking about 4 million jobs overall, but 2,000 to 4,000 that will have to be chopped off because the money runs out when this bill expires, when the previous bill expires. So it is critical that we get that done. Now, another important thing with those 2,000 to 4,000 people that will have to be laid off at FDA, those are our key technicians, scientists, informed people that have been working with this for a long time. And if we lose them, they'll still have jobs. It just won't be where we can get drugs on the market faster, devices on the market faster, generic drugs out faster, and all of the other things that this bill covers. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank Chairman Harkin and all the other members of the Health Committee, the FDA, industry, and many other groups for working us on this important legislation. I particularly want to point out the cooperation that Senator Harkin has provided, the leadership that he's provided on the bill, and the way that his staff members and mine have worked together for this at least a year of regular meetings with all members of the committee. And so I think a lot of the controversy that could come up with a bill like this has been taken care of. I'm hoping that it has, so that we can get this done expeditiously. So I thank the chair and yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you. What I'd like to talk about this afternoon, Mr. President, is a bit about the President's economic record. I'm sure that Americans have noticed that the President barely mentions this economic record when he's out on the campaign trail, and I can well understand why it's not a very impressive record, especially if you're a taxpayer or a business owner. Our national debt creeps closer to $16 trillion each day. It's now more than $5 trillion more than it was when the president took office. It now adds to about $50,000 per person in the United States, and that is exclusive of interest payments. And by way of contrast, the median yearly household income, in other words, all the people in the house, is less than $50,000. It's $49,445. Unemployment recently dropped, but it did so for the simple reason that fewer people are searching for work. And the president's signature legislative items is stimulus bill, Obamacare, Dodd-Frank. They've not only been unhelpful in boosting growth, but they've left a trail of crushing debt and uncertainty and new regulations in their wake. And I wanted to make a few points today about each of those bills because I think they paint a fair picture of the president's economic record. First, let me talk about the stimulus. We haven't forgotten about the stimulus, even though I suspect the president might like to. $1.2 trillion. It obviously failed to achieve the promised results. An Associated Press reporter wrote shortly before it was signed into law, and I quote, they call it stimulus legislation, but the economic measures racing through Congress would devote tens of billions of dollars to causes that have little to do with jolting the country out of a recession, end of quote. And, of course, that's exactly what happened. It seemed more designed to shower taxpayer dollars on certain favored constituencies and pet interests than to actually jumpstart the economy. Much of it was simply wasteful Washington spending. Many investors must have asked themselves why they should put their money to risk on new job-creating ventures when they have to compete with well-connected firms that can simply wring taxpayer-provided stimulus dollars out of Congress or the Obama administration. A Washington Post poll released just last week showed that 48% of Americans have an unfavorable view of the stimulus. And this was, after all, the president's signature effort to spur the economy. Indeed, as Jeffrey Anderson notes in a recent issue of the Weekly Standard magazine, the administration does seem to be downplaying the law. Not only has the stimulus failed to create robust growth, the costs have become more outrageous. He writes, quote, it has now been 5 months since the administration last put out a report card on the stimulus. The December report marked the 6th straight quarterly report showing that stimulus's cost per job is rising. In reports spanning January 2010 to December 2011, the stimulus's cost per job more than doubled, rising from $146,000 in January 2010 to $317,000 in December 2011. With each passing quarter, the stimulus has become an even worse deal for taxpayers, end of quote. So this is the administration's own report card on the stimulus, concluding in the last report, $317,000 per job. Think about that for a moment. To create each job, the taxpayers shell out $317,000. Numbers like these remind me of a quip from writer Christopher Buckley. He said, writing political satire these days can be difficult because it has to compete with reality. $317,000 for one job under the president's stimulus. Well, second, Obamacare. The $2.6 trillion bill is not aging very well. Since its passage, the Act has imposed an estimated $14.9 billion in private sector burdens, approximately $7 billion in costs to the states, and $58.6 million annual paperwork hours, according to a weekly regulatory report. The April Kaiser Health Tracking poll showed that more Americans have an unfavorable view of the law than favorable. It's 43 to 42%. And more than half of Americans oppose its central provision, the so-called individual mandate. All told, the new taxes in Obamacare would add up to $500 billion over 10 years. Many of these taxes will coincide with the biggest tax increase in history, the one scheduled for the end of this year. So at the very time that the income tax rates are scheduled to go up, the new taxes from Obamacare will hit. $500 billion worth of new taxes over the next 10 years. And finally, there's the Dodd-Frank Financial Regulatory Reform Bill. When it comes to financial regulatory reform, I think most Americans believe there should be two simple goals: preventing new crises from happening and making sure the taxpayers aren't on the hook for Wall Street's mistakes. Well, the Dodd-Frank bill did not achieve either goal. It's a complex web of regulations that institutionalized too big to fail and has served to increase uncertainty, increase moral hazard, and increase economic distortions, all the while adding 52.9 million paperwork hours since its passage. So, as I said, President Obama doesn't seem to be running for re-election on this record of the stimulus package, Obamacare, or Dodd-Frank regulatory reform. Instead, he's going to be sending, or maybe he's already sent it to Congress, a to-do list, things he'd like for Congress to do, most of which are tax credits and other very short-term proposals that are not likely to have a big effect on jobs or growth, because the business sector is not impressed with a one-time only short-term proposition. It wants to know that when it invests money, that investment is going to be for the long term. Apparently he's going to campaign on this most recent list when he goes out to Iowa later this week. Well, this happens to be Small Business Week, and one would think the President would turn to something that businesses have actually said that they would like to do, and that is to prevent this tax tsunami coming at the end of the year. As I mentioned, the biggest tax increase in the history of the country, which automatically would take effect on January 1st of next year unless Congress does something about it and the President can sign the legislation. The NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, recently released a list of the top 5 uncertainties in the tax code that they say would harm small businesses. Let me just mention 3 of these uncertainties. One is the pending increase in marginal tax rates, which will devastate the estimated 75% of small businesses that file as individuals. Every one of the 5 tax rates in the IRS code will be increased as of January 1st. And since most of the businesses now pay, especially small businesses, as individuals, so-called pass-through entities, these rate increases directly will impact small businesses. Second thing they're really concerned about is the death tax. That's going to ensnare 900 times more small business owners and 2,200 times more family farmers if the rate increases to 55% and the exemption falls to $1 million, as is scheduled to occur on January 1st. Third is the alternative minimum tax, which will hit 27 million more Americans, including many small businesses, if it's not patched or repealed. Well, small business cannot afford this, what's been called tax-mageddon, and its devastating consequences. And I would hope that instead of this to-do list the President is sending us, that he would take up the cause of preventing this big tax increase at the end of the year and help the small businesses and families that need that help. Final thing I would say, and I will ask unanimous consent to include in the record at the end of my remarks a piece in National Review Online by Larry Kudlow on May 17th called "Extend the Bush Tax Cuts Now," if I could ask for unanimous consent for that.
Without objection.
Thank you. In this piece, Larry Kudlow, a noted economist, notes that with respect to this tax-mageddon, the increase in everybody's taxes at the end of this year, that it is the uncertainty of it all that's preventing the investment by business which would create the jobs that we would all like to see. And I'd just like to quote 3 paragraphs and a couple of sentences and a fourth. He says, "The uncertainty over the Bush tax cuts already has caused a number of business leaders to threaten a hiring freeze and a dampening of investment until they can figure out the after-tax cost of capital and the rate of return on investment. Hiring has slowed noticeably in recent months, and a number of Wall Street economists are marking down the anemic recovery even more, suggesting that the 3% growth at the end of last year, which faltered to 2% growth in the first quarter, could be even less in the period ahead." And then he goes on to say a bunch of CEOs have even formed their own march on Washington. 18 of them just wrote to Treasury man Timothy Geithner, begging him to oppose tax rate hikes on dividends, which would go from 15% to 45%, and capital gains, from 15% to near 30%. He says equity capital is the lifeblood of investment and job creation for U.S. companies. That's what these CEOs wrote in the letter to Treasury Secretary Geithner. And Kudlow goes on to say, and they argued that the administration's tax hike plans would do great harm to American competitiveness and capital formation. And then he quotes the Ernst & Young firm to say this: the top U.S. integrated tax rate on corporate profits and dividends is on course to hit 68.6%, significantly higher than all other OECD countries. Those are the developed countries of the world, as well as Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Capital gains would rise to 56.7%. In other words, he's pointing out that not only would these higher tax rates hurt the small businesses and the families because of the individual tax rate, marginal rate increases, but raising the dividends and capital gains taxes would be even more detrimental, because we're asking companies in America to compete with firms all over the world, and their rate would be much, much higher with this tax increase than the rate in all of the other developed countries, as well as countries like Brazil, Russia, India, and China. How could American businesses compete in that situation? And then finally, Kudlow notes the effect of all of this uncertainty on what matters most to most Americans, and that is the fact that they can't get work. He says, bizarrely, some 25 million people have vanished from the labor force, from unemployment, underemployment, or simply dropping out altogether. And half of U.S. households are now on some form of federal transfer payment assistance. So as we pay, he said, many people not to work, we're sapping the vitality of the economy. Mr. President, this is absolutely true. With half of the people in the country on some form of federal assistance, with 25 million people having just vanished from the labor force, not even looking for work anymore, businesses sitting on the sidelines because they cannot calculate what kind of return on investment they could get because of the potential for this huge tax increase that's going to occur on January 1st, it's no wonder that we can't move forward with an economic recovery. And so I would just say to President Obama that providing long-term tax rate certainty would go a long way toward establishing a sound economy in this country, on putting Americans back to work, and ironically on establishing a better record on which the President could run. And a year and a half ago, the President actually proposed, and Congress was, I think, very happy to go along with, a continuation of the existing tax rates, because, as he said at the time, not to do so would be very damaging to the economy. And I would just submit that it's equally damaging for that to happen at the end of this year. So I would ask the President, help give the American people and American businesses the certainty that they need to invest, to create the jobs, to advance our economic growth, and create prosperity for our future.